This is CPRmetro.org, community progressive radio for the metropolitan New York area and the world. 10 years ago, on February 15th, 2003, the largest demonstration in the history of mankind took place against the pending U.S. invasion of Iraq. Today we're going to examine what happened and what has happened since, so that we can discuss what needs to be done to put an end to war. And we're going to start that in a moment, but first a little music.
To me. Oh, I despise, 'cause it means destruction of innocent life. War means tears to thousands of mothers' eyes when their sons go off to fight and lose their lives. I said war. Good God, y'all. What is it good for? Absolutely. Get sad again.
Almost a year to the day after the attacks on the World Trade Center, Pentagon in the United States, President George Bush gave a speech, and he had been attempting to tie together the attack by 18 men using airplanes against the United States with the government of Iraq. On September 12th, 2002, he made these remarks.
Please be seated. Lauren, I appreciate you all coming. It's an honor to be with you tonight. I want to apologize for the photo line taking so long. I'm the person to blame. I talked too much. But thank you for coming. I appreciate so very much all the presidents who are here, and the prime ministers who are here, and the foreign ministers who are here, the ambassadors to the UN who are here. I want to thank my citizens from our country who are here. I appreciate John Negroponte, the ambassador to the United Nations. I want to thank the members of the United States Congress who are here. I see 1, 2, 3, several members, 4, 5, they're everywhere. These guys know a good free meal when they see one. I especially want to say a word of praise to Kofi Annan, who's the Secretary General of the United Nations, for his strong leadership and his good heart and his decency. I enjoy working with him a lot. He's a class act, as we say in the state of Texas, and I know you all agree with me in that. We gather tonight here in a place of, right next to a place of great tragedy and great sorrow. And we also gather in a garden of great hope and renewal. From this room we can view the empty space where these magnificent towers once stood, and remember those who perished 1 year and 1 day ago. And in this room we see and feel the common commitment of our nations to build a better world, to work hard to see to it that good can overcome evil. Ever since it opened in 1988, the Winter Garden has been one of New York's most beautiful public spaces, a place where people gathered to hear music and view art against the backdrop of one of the world's greatest skylines. September the 11th, in just a few moments, that skyline was a scene of fire and murder. This atrium was filled with steel and glass, and history turned a page. Scores of nations lost citizens that day, and in the 366 days since, scores of nations have committed themselves to confronting and combating the threat of global terror. Our nations have employed the powers of law and enforcement, of diplomacy, military force, and financial controls to bring justice, not to seek revenge, but to bring justice and to prevent further attacks. Much has been accomplished, and it's important to remember much remains to be done. On behalf of the people of the United States, on behalf of the good people of this land, I want to thank every nation that has joined us in this great global struggle. The terrible losses of September 11th are close to our thoughts tonight, but so are the common hopes of our nations for a better world, a world beyond terror. And again, this room is a powerful symbol of these hopes. In one short, remarkable year, the Winter Garden has been reborn. The speed and success of this rebuilding effort is a testament to the optimism and determination of the people of New York and the people of the world. More than 1 million pounds of marble for this building was quarried in Italy and Spain. As one quarry official stated, "We didn't consider this a job. It was a duty." And now the world is called to urgent duties. We're called upon to reaffirm great founding purposes of the United Nations: universal standards of human dignity and a global system of peace and security. We're called to confront great challenges to these ideals, from poverty and disease to terror and the aggression of tyrants. By our determination, by our faith, by cooperation, we can and we will meet these tests. And by our efforts, we will lift the lives of people on every continent. Thank you all for coming tonight. May God bless your countries, and may God bring peace to the world.
That was George Bush on the 12th of September in 2002. Less than a month later, a discussion took place on the floor of the House of Representatives, leading up to a vote to authorize President Bush to attack Iraq. We're going to go to that now.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the motion to recommit. We know that for every action, there is a reaction. We do not know what danger lies before us. Every American has the right to know what price, in terms of human lives and economic resources, that they will have to pay. We owe them some answers. This is about life or death. We owe them answers to the questions that my colleague from Ohio has raised and will raise, and far more. In a democracy, the people have a right to know.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to my colleague and neighbor from Ohio, Representative Sherrod Brown.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank my friend from Cleveland. International Relations Committee, I offered this language embodied in the Kucinich recommittal motion. If we give the President the authority to radically change our decades-old military doctrine of containment and deterrence, we need answers to questions the American people are asking. If we strike Iraq on our own, will our coalition against terrorism fracture? Most of our allies in the war on terror oppose U.S. unilateral action against Iraq. And what would a unilateral strike tell the world? Does it embolden Russia to attack Georgia, to chase down Chechnyan rebels? Does it set an international precedent for China to go into Taiwan, or to deal even more harshly with Tibet? Does it embolden India, Pakistan, or both, each with nuclear weapons, from going to war to protect their interest in Kashmir? And if we win a unilateral war, will we be responsible for unilaterally rebuilding Iraq? This Congress should not authorize the use of force unless the administration can detail what it plans to do and how we deal with the consequences of our actions. Vote yes on the recommittal motion.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself 3 minutes.
Gentleman's recognized.
The resolution, H.J. Res. 114, gives the President the authority to use all necessary force at his discretion. This motion to recommit is neutral on this central point. And I know there are people on both sides of the aisle, on both sides of the proposition before us, who are interested in knowing that this resolution does not take a position on the underlying bill. But with power comes responsibility, and in a democracy, the responsibility is to the people. This motion to recommit would assign the administration with the responsibility to inform the American people on key questions raised by a use of force in Iraq, questions that members on both sides of this proposition have raised. The American people want to know, what will a use of force in Iraq cost, and how will it be paid for? With budget cuts, with more borrowing, with tax increases? The American people want to know, what financial commitment is the administration making to address humanitarian consequences of a use of force in Iraq? The American people want to know, what impact will the use of force in Iraq have on the economy of the United States and on the important price of oil? The American people want to know how a use of force in Iraq will affect efforts to prevent further terrorist attacks. The American people want to know these things because they know that ultimately they will be required to pay the price. They're entitled to answers. And the motion to recommit ensures that they will get those answers before they get the bill. Now, Mr. Speaker, as the ranking Democrat on the National Security Subcommittee of Government Oversight, I've sat in on several meetings where the Department of Defense Inspector General and the General Accounting Office have both informed the Congress that 250,000 biological and chemical protective suits are defective. 250,000 of these suits are defective, but the Department of Defense cannot account for them. This motion before us would help protect our troops by requiring assurance that the United States Armed Forces deployed have been provided with functioning equipment to protect against chemical and biological agents in sufficient levels, and that this equipment is not defective. Mr. Speaker, this becomes particularly urgent since the Central Intelligence Agency has just informed the Congress that if the United States invades Iraq, Saddam Hussein can be expected to use whatever biological or chemical weapons he may have. Whatever our position on the war, I'm certain that we want to protect our troops who would be called upon to put their lives on the line to protect this country. This is an example of the information which the American people have a right to know.
Gentleman has 30 seconds remaining.
I yield myself the remainder of the time. So, Mr. Speaker, this has been an important debate for our nation. People on both sides of this proposition as to whether or not the United States should pursue action against Iraq are doing the best they can to represent our country. All of us love our country. But our love of country should include our desire to get answers on behalf of our constituents, answers on behalf of those who would be called to serve overseas. So it's in that spirit that I ask my colleagues on both sides of the aisle and both sides of this proposition to join in support of this motion to recommit with instructions. Thank you.
Gentleman from Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman opposed to the motion to recommit.
I certainly am.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I oppose the motion to recommit, and if anybody wants detailed reasons, I suggest you read it. It is a very sets up roadblocks that I think are virtually insurmountable. You know, in the thousands of words we've heard in the last couple of days uttered on Iraq, a few important truths emerge. First, Saddam Hussein is a very dangerous person. The history of his regime is one of unrestrained violence against Iran, against Kuwait, against the Kurds, against the Shias, and against others whose only offense is to oppose his despotic regime. Secondly, he hates America. Thirdly, he is making a feverish attempt to arm with weapons of immeasurable destructive capacity, and when he's ready, he'll use them. Do you remember the first time you saw the films of the mushroom cloud engulfing Hiroshima, and then you learned about the deadly effect of radiation on humans? That was 1945. Does the fact that modern thermonuclear weapons would unleash 1,000 times the destructive power of Hiroshima worry you at all? You might ask, why are we debating this resolution at this moment in time? The answer should be apparent. September 11th was more than a wake-up call. It shook us out of a long, deep sleep and held us by the throat. It taught us there are people in the world willing to destroy themselves to gratify their hatred, and we had better take them seriously. We tend to visualize what we call weapons of mass destruction in terms of bombs reducing buildings to rubble. But missiles can carry bombs with chemical and biological agents that can poison a city as well as destroy its infrastructure. Either way, it's death and destruction on a horrendous scale. Is such an attack imminent? Did we know Pearl Harbor was imminent? Did we know the World Trade Center attacks were imminent? The willingness to destroy must never marry the capability to destroy. And Santayana is right. Those who don't read history are condemned to relive it. In a book written sometime after, I suppose in the 40s, by William C. Bullitt, who was our first ambassador to Russia, appointed by President Roosevelt, called The Great Globe Itself, he said, to beat our swords into plowshares while the spiritual descendants of Genghis Khan stalk the earth is to die and leave no descendants. The world looks to us for leadership. The world looks to us for strength and resolve. We make no demands for territory or commercial advantage. All we want is a peaceful world. If you love peace, prepare for war, said the ancient Romans. There are ideals and ideas worth fighting for. They're the civilizing forces that make life worth living, that respect the dignity that is every person's entitlement. Those ideals and principles are under attack, and we must defend them. By supporting the president, we send a message to the forces of conquest and chaos that America, the West, isn't as decadent as they may think. Support the president, and I yield back.
Without objection, the previous question is ordered on the motion to recommit. The question is on the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The noes have it. The motion is not agreed to.
Mr. Speaker,
Gentleman from Ohio.
I raise a point of order that a quorum is not present and demand a recorded vote.
The gentleman objects to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present. Evidently, as a quorum is not present. Therefore, the yeas and nays are ordered on the motion to recommit. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This will be a 17-minute vote on the motion to recommit.
Live coverage of the U.S. House as they consider House Joint Resolution 114 authorizing the use of force against Iraq. Right now, the House is voting on a motion to recommit with instructions. It's the last chance to change the resolution before its final vote. The motion says the President must report to Congress on the impact of the military action against Iraq on national security. The report must include an estimate of the costs of military action and reconstruction in Iraq and a plan for paying those costs. While this vote is underway, we're opening up our phone lines to hear your thoughts on the resolution. If you support the resolution, the number to call is 202-737-0001. If you oppose the resolution, the number to call is 202-737-0002. And for viewers watching outside the United States on satellite or via the Internet, the number is 202-628-0205. And we remind you just to mute your TV sound if you do get through. We'll go first to Gaithersburg, Maryland. Your thoughts. Hello. Gaithersburg, you're on the line.
Hi, I'm Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Okay, Belmont, Pennsylvania.
Go ahead.
I support the motion to recommit. I'm against being the first to strike any other country. My students, I teach, and a lot of my students have joined the services, and they wanted to defend the United States but not attack other countries.
Thank you. Now we have Gaithersburg on the line. Hi, what are your thoughts?
Well, I was just wondering, we have so bad economy right now, all the things are going wrong, and they're talking about fight with Iraq. Why now? Why not look at the economy and other things, in the nation instead of going after Iraq?
Thank you for your call. We go to Belmont, Pennsylvania. Dallas, Texas, excuse me. You're on the support line. What are your thoughts? Hello, Dallas.
Dallas, yes, hi. I'm calling from Dallas, Texas. I think the United States needs to reevaluate their allies, such as the Germans. That's where all these idiots are from, the Muslims. So I would just like to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Belmont, Pennsylvania is our next call. Hello, what's your thought?
Yes, I wanted to support the use of force against Iraq.
Tell me why.
The reason is because I think we have to do it before he attacks us. And my wife agrees.
Thanks for your call. The House is currently voting on a motion to recommit with instructions. It's a last chance to change the resolution before the final vote. And while this vote is underway, we're taking your thoughts, your calls. We go to Dallas, Texas. Support of the resolution. Hello, Dallas.
Hello. This is about the resolution.
Yes.
To, fix, at least add something to the this vote.
Tell me what you're thinking.
I would I have the TV on here. I feel very strongly that President Bush should not be allowed to go in without having to come back to the Congress and let us know what is going on, and a preemptive strike.
Thank you.
Is a concern, a deep, deep, deep concern to me, and I thank you for the opportunity to express my...
We go to our international line. It's a call from Israel. Hello, are you on the line?
Good, yes, I'm on the line.
Go ahead. What are your thoughts?
First of all, I oppose the motion to recommit. This is just another attempt to delay the resolution. I am in full support of the resolution. I think we need to send a clear message to Saddam Hussein and not to give him a chance to rebuild his nuclear infrastructure.
Is the topic getting much coverage in Israel?
Israel seems to be a low profile on this, and but I would speak for myself, and a friend of mine are fully believe that Israel is in good condition, ready, in full support of United States, President Bush, and we know there will be some consequences, but we're ready, and we will face anything.
Thank you for your call. We go to a call on our Support the Resolution line. Tell us why. This is a call from California, correct?
Yes, it is.
What city are you calling from?
I'm calling from Rancho Cucamonga.
Okay.
And I'm extremely, extremely impressed with Kucinich. I've been watching now on C-SPAN for the last couple of weeks, and he is absolutely outstanding. As I've written down names of others, also from our state, but from other states as well.
Who is your representative in Rancho Cucamonga?
My representative in Congress would be Joe Baca.
And do you know how Representative Baca will be voting?
God only knows. I haven't been able to see how, I can't watch it 24 hours. I have no idea at this point.
Well, thank you for your opinion. Thank you, Lancaster, California. You're on the on the opposed line. Tell us why. I just want to remind you. I'll put you on hold, and we'll try to come back to you. Just remind you when you do call in, make sure you mute the television set. While the House is working on this motion to recommit, the Senate is also working on an Iraq resolution. Their version is identical to the House measure, authorizing the president to use military force against Iraq. Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle explains his support this morning earlier on the Senate floor.
This resolution gives the president the authority he needs to confront the threat posed by Iraq. It is fundamentally different and a better resolution than the one the president sent to us. It is neither a Democratic resolution or a Republican resolution. It is now a statement of American resolve and values. It is more respectful of our Constitution, more reflective of our understanding that we need to work with our allies in this effort, and more in keeping with our strong belief that force must be a last resort, not a first response. Because this resolution is improved, and because I believe that Saddam Hussein represents a real threat, and because I believe it is important for America to speak with one voice at this critical moment, I will vote to give the president the authority he needs. But I respect those who reach different conclusions. From For me, the deciding factor is my belief that a united Congress will help the President unite the world. And by uniting the world, we can increase the world's chances of succeeding in this effort and reduce both the risks and the costs that America may have to bear. With this resolution, we are giving the President extraordinary authority. How he exercises that authority will determine how successful any action in Iraq might be. In 1991, by the time the President's father sought congressional support to use force against Iraq, he had secured pledges of military cooperation from nearly 40 nations and statements of support from scores of others. He had already secured the backing of the United Nations, and he had already developed a clear plan of action. In assembling that coalition, the legitimacy of our cause was affirmed. Regional stability was maintained. The risk to our soldiers was lessened. America's burden was reduced. And perhaps most importantly, Iraq was isolated. At this point, we have done none of those things. That is why, unlike in 1991, our vote on this resolution should be seen as the beginning of a process, not the end. For our efforts in Iraq to succeed, the President must continue to consult with Congress and work hard to build a global coalition. That is not capitulation. It is leadership. And it is essential. In my view, there are 5 other crucial steps. Steps the administration must take before any final decision on the use of force in Iraq is made. First and foremost, the President needs to be honest with the American people, not only about the benefits of action against Iraq, but also about the risks and the costs of such action. We are no longer talking about driving Saddam Hussein back to within his borders. We are talking about driving him from power. That is a much more difficult and complicated goal. A story in this past Sunday's Philadelphia Inquirer suggests that top officials in the administration, quote, have exaggerated the degree of Allied support for a war in Iraq. The story goes on to say that others in the administration are, quote, rankled by what they charge as a tendency, unquote, by some in the administration to, quote, gloss over the unpleasant realities of a potential war with Iraq. A report in yesterday's Washington Post suggests that, quote, an increasing number of intelligence officials, including former and current intelligence agency employees, are concerned the agency is tailoring its public stance to fit the administration's views. I do not know whether these reports are accurate. We do know from our own national experience, however, that public support for military action can evaporate quickly if the American people come to believe that they have not been given all of the facts. If that should happen, no resolution in Congress might pass that would unify our nation. The American people expect, and success demands, that they be told both the benefits and the risks involved in any action against Iraq.
After Senator Daschle spoke, senators approved limiting debate on their Iraq resolution. Senate Minority Leader Trent Lott explained that vote and updated reporters on the Iraq resolution.
As you see, we're making progress on the Iraq resolution. We have had more senators, Democrat and Republican, indicate that they are going to vote for the resolution on its final passage, and I think that the numbers will continue to grow. One indication of that was the vote that was just completed on cloture, which is to end a threatened filibuster which could have taken the whole issue out for days. And the vote was 75-25. That doesn't necessarily mean that would be the vote on the substance on final passage. but it's probably pretty close. In fact, I think the vote would be higher than that on final passage, because there are some senators that may say, well, more time to debate it wouldn't hurt. I spoke to that point on the floor, though. When we had the Gulf War resolution up, we spent 2.5 days on it. When we had the Iraqi Liberation Act in 1998, which I was lead sponsor on and had bipartisan support, I think we might have taken a half a day, and it passed unanimously. So we have had plenty of time to think about this issue, for congressmen to be briefed on classified information, for senators and congressmen to speak on the issue in the House and in the Senate. And we started last week. We had a full day Friday, full day Monday, full day Tuesday, Wednesday, and then of course we continue to have amendments offered and votes today. We have 3 more already scheduled that would occur at 12, 2, and 4 probably. We'll have some more debate after that. And there is a possibility, in fact, Senator Daschle hopes that we can get the final passage tonight. And I certainly would be supportive of that effort.
Debate continues in the Senate on the resolution to authorize use of force in Iraq. You can see live Senate coverage on our companion network, C-SPAN 2, and you can read both the House and Senate resolutions online at cspan.org/Iraq.
This is what Bill Clinton had to say about the Iraq Liberation Act that he signed in 1998.
This crisis also demonstrates, unfortunately, once again, that Saddam Hussein remains an impediment to the well-being of his people and a threat to the peace of his region and the security of the world. We will continue to contain the threat that he poses by working for the elimination of Iraq's weapons of mass destruction capability under UNSCOM, enforcing the sanctions in the no-fly zone, responding firmly to any Iraqi provocations. However, over the long term, the best way to address that threat is through a government in Baghdad, a new government that is committed to represent and respect its people, not repress them, that is committed to peace in the region. Over the past year, we have deepened our engagement with the forces of change in Iraq, reconciling the 2 largest Kurdish opposition groups, beginning broadcasts of a radio-free Iraq throughout the country. We will intensify that effort, working with Congress to implement the Iraq Liberation Act, which was recently passed, strengthening our political support to make sure the opposition, or to do what we can to make the opposition, a more effective voice for the aspirations of the Iraqi people. Let me say again, what we want and what we will work for is a government in Iraq that represents and respects its people, not represses them, and one committed to live in peace with its neighbors. In the century we are leaving, America has often made the difference between tyranny and freedom, between chaos and community, between fear and hope. In this case, as so often in the past, the reason America can make this difference is the patriotism and professionalism of our military. Once again, its strength, its readiness, its capacity is advancing America's interest and the cause of world peace. We must remain vigilant, strong, and ready, here and wherever our interests and values are at stake. Thanks to our military, we will be able to do so.
Meanwhile, here, let's do this too.
The hard fact is that so long as Saddam remains in power, he threatens the well-being of his people, the peace of his region, the security of the world. The best way to end that threat, once and for all, is with a new Iraqi government, a government ready to live in peace with its neighbors, a government that respects the rights of its people. Bringing change in Baghdad will take time and effort. We will strengthen our engagement with the full range of Iraqi opposition forces and work with them effectively and prudently.
Meanwhile, his vice president and the presidential candidate in the year 2000, Al Gore, had similar opinions.
Almost exactly 7 years ago, our soldiers were called upon to once again show the world just what they could do in the deserts of Iraq when Saddam's forces surrendered to our allied coalition, and Kuwaiti citizens once again proudly proclaimed their independence from Saddam's tyranny. Since then, of course, in Haiti and Rwanda and Bosnia, in Europe, Korea, and beyond, every hour of every day and night, on land, in the air, and at sea, our troops have served our nation with tremendous courage and effectiveness. And now, once again, the international community faces a serious challenge in the Persian Gulf, a challenge that has engaged the very best of our diplomatic skills and could once again test the might and mettle of our armed forces.
This is 1998.
There should be no doubt Saddam's ability to produce and deliver weapons of mass destruction poses a grave threat to the peace of that region and the security of the world. His defiance of the will of the international community to allow UNSCOM to do its job cannot and will not be tolerated. And for that reason, over the last several months, President Clinton and his team, the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense, along with the support of leaders in our Congress such as Senator Lott and Senator Daschle, Speaker Gingrich and Leader Gephardt, Senator Robb and Congressman Skelton and their colleagues in both chambers of the Congress, with the support of all these individuals, the President and his team have been pursuing every possible diplomatic solution to this problem. And even now we're working around the clock to pursue a possible diplomatic solution and to ensure that the international community is united in the face of Saddam's threats. Saddam should never doubt the will of the American people, their legislators, their military, or their commander-in-chief to protect our interests, defend our security, and ensure the well-being of our fellow citizens and that of our friends and allies around the world. He should know that when it comes to protecting our vital national interests, Americans will stand as one. We will speak as one. And whenever necessary, we will act as one.
Gore also criticized Bush for what he said, what he called ignoring Iraq's ties to terrorism.
The conduct of the war will remain a proud memory for all Americans. But the full history must also include events before and after the war.
This is 1992.
That detailed record requires a little more time and effort to understand. And if we really want to judge President Bush's stewardship of policy, then we had better pay attention to that detailed record, which provides a deeply disturbing look at a blatant disregard for brutal terrorism, a dangerous blindness to the murderous ambitions of a despot, and what certainly appears to be an ongoing effort to hide the facts from the American people whose tax dollars paid for this policy and whose sons and daughters risked and lost their lives in its pursuit. For example, in April of 1984, Bush personally lobbied the Ex-Im Bank's chairman, a friend from college days, to disregard the views of his own economists and extend credits to Iraq. Doubts about Iraq's creditworthiness were very well founded, but the overriding issue was whether Iraq could continue to hold on in the war with Iran. That's all that seemed to matter. In pursuit of that objective, the Reagan-Bush administration would overlook the fact that it was an Iraq-based group that masterminded the assassination attempt against Israel's ambassador to the United Kingdom, which occurred in June of 1982. This event, of course, triggered Israel's invasion of Lebanon, not exactly a minor consequence for U.S. policy. The Reagan-Bush administration was also prepared to overlook the fact that the terrorist who masterminded the attack on the Achille Lauro and the savage murder of American Leon Klinghoffer fled with Iraqi assistance. Nor did it seem to matter that the team of terrorists who set out to blow up the Rome airport came directly from Baghdad with suitcase bombs. Iraq not only stayed off the terrorist list, no matter what, But in November 1984, full diplomatic relations were established with the country. The U.S. government continued to exert every effort to channel assistance to Saddam Hussein, even with evidence that he was not only promoting terrorism, but was also pursuing a nuclear weapons program. As early as May of 1985, Assistant Secretary of Defense Richard Pearl warned about the suspected diversion of U.S. exports of dual-use technology to the Iraqi nuclear weapons program. But Bush ensured that the flow of technology continued. In March 1987, Bush again took a prominent role. When Iraq's ambassador complained that our Defense Department was taking too long and being too cautious about export licenses for high-tech items, Bush apparently agreed with him that the Defense Department was being capricious and had to get with the program. There might have been a moment's pause for reflection when Iraqi aircraft intentionally attacked the USS Stark in May of 1987, killing 37 sailors, but the administration smoothed it over very fast. Bush deserves heavy blame for intentionally concealing from the American people the clear nature of Saddam Hussein and his regime, and for convincing himself that friendly relations with such a monster would be possible, and for persisting in this effort far, far beyond the point of folly. Throughout this period, Saddam's atrocities continued. In March of 1988, Saddam used poison gas on the Kurdish town of Halabja, brutally murdering some 5,000 innocent men, women, and children. And none of us can ever forget the pictures of their bodies, of parents trying to shield their infants, even in death, that were in our news media and around the world. The Iran-Iraq War then ended in August of 1988, and Iraq had not prevailed, but neither had it been defeated. As a result, you would think that the administration would give our policies a second look to see if they should be altered. But the Reagan-Bush administration never hesitated, even when the news became much, much worse. Within days of the end of the Iran-Iraq War, Saddam Hussein, seeing that he had gotten away with using poison gas against the Kurds previously, launched additional major gas attacks on them. The war was over, and he was determined to settle accounts. Saddam's attacks created, in addition to the wave of deaths, a flight of about 500,000 Kurdish refugees. The effect of these events on the public and on Congress was electrifying. The outrage and disgust sparked action and ignited an intensification of efforts in the Congress to pull the plug on U.S. support for Saddam Hussein. I myself went to the Senate floor twice demanding tough action, but these efforts were resisted to the bitter end by the Reagan-Bush and Bush-Quayle administrations. In January 1989, President George Bush was sworn in. Based on plentiful evidence, he had reason to know that his ongoing policy regarding Iraq was already malfunctioning badly. Just last week, we learned of a memorandum written in March of that year, just 2 months after his inauguration, to Secretary of State James Baker, as Baker prepared to meet with a senior Iraqi official, in which the author of the memorandum noted that Iraq continued to cooperate with terrorists, that it was meddling in Lebanon, that it was working hard at chemical and biological weapons and new missiles. These are exact quotes from the memorandum to the administration. And most significant of all, in the same month, September of 1989, the CIA reported to Secretary of State Baker and other top Bush administration officials that Iraq was clandestinely procuring nuclear weapons technology through a global network of front companies. Did all of this make any impression at all on President Bush? Did his judgment on foreign policy come into play when he was told that this nation with a record of terrorism continuing was making a sustained, concerted effort to acquire weapons of mass destruction, nuclear, chemical, and biological? Well, evidently not, because in the midst of this flood of highly alarming information from the CIA, the Defense Department, the Energy Department, the Commerce Department, the Justice Department, the State Department, other agencies throughout the government, on October 2nd, 1989, President Bush signed a document known as NSD-26. NSD-26 mandated the pursuit of improved economic and political ties with Iraq on the assumption that Iraqi behavior could be modified by means of new favors to be granted. Well, perhaps so, if this were a state not under the complete control of a single man whose ruthlessness had already been totally apparent, and the text of NSD-26 blindly ignores the evidence already at the administration's disposal of Iraqi behavior in the past regarding human rights, terrorism, the use of chemical weapons, the pursuit of advanced weapons of mass destruction. Instead, it makes an heroic assumption of good behavior in the future on the basis of an interesting theory, namely, that Iraq would suddenly and completely change its ways out of a fear of economic and political sanctions. Well, it leaps from the page that George Bush, both as vice president and president, had done his utmost to make sure that no such sanctions would ever apply to Saddam Hussein. Bush was the very man who had personally intervened to secure hundreds of millions of dollars in additional loans. And what was the result on the second occasion he did that? 48 hours later, Saddam ordered the attack on the USS Stark. 48 hours later. The question is unavoidable. Why should Saddam Hussein be at all concerned about a threat of action in the future from George Bush, the same man who had resolutely blocked any such action in the past? To the contrary, Saddam had every reason to assume that Bush would look the other way no matter what he did. He had already launched poison gas attacks repeatedly, and Bush looked the other way. He had already conducted extensive terrorism activities, and Bush had looked the other way. He was already deeply involved in the effort to acquire nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction, and Bush knew it, but he looked the other way.
Other Democrats spoke to the issue of Iraq's WMDs. These are from the period right before the war on Iraq. This is CPRmetro.org, Community Progressive Radio for the metropolitan New York area and the world. And we are inside a look at February 15th, 2003, when the world came out against the pending war on Iraq. And we're just waiting for this clip.
What if he fails to comply and we fail to act? Or we take some ambiguous third route, which gives him yet more opportunities to develop this program of weapons of mass destruction? Well, he will conclude that the international community has lost his will. He will then conclude that he can go right on and do more to rebuild an arsenal of devastating destruction. And someday, some way, I guarantee you, he'll use the arsenal.
That was from 1998.
I vote to give the President of the United States the authority to use force if necessary to disarm Saddam Hussein, because I believe that a deadly arsenal of weapons of mass destruction in his hands is a threat, and a grave threat to our security and that of our allies in the Persian Gulf.
That was John Kerry, October 9th, 2002. That's our Secretary of State now.
Let me play a quick clip for you. Here's what is so remarkable to me. The very people that made the very same arguments that the President made are now distancing themselves from their own remarks. For example, like Hillary Clinton. Let's run her remarks.
In the 4 years since the inspectors left, intelligence reports show that Saddam Hussein has worked to rebuild his chemical and biological weapons stock, his missile delivery capability, and his nuclear program. He has also given aid, comfort, and sanctuary to terrorists including al-Qaeda members.
That was Hillary Clinton. We're going to go back to the House of Representatives debate on the war resolution that was before them, October 2002. And I believe first up is Maxine Waters. This is CPRmetro.org, Community Progressive Radio for the metropolitan New York area and the world. And we are examining 10 years after February 15th, 2003, when the world stood up against the war on Iraq that was about to begin. About a month later, millions of people in some 80 countries around the world, more than 800 cities around the world, came out on February 15th to demonstrate against the war. And in about 4 weeks, the United States launched a war on Iraq that continues to this day. Let's see if we can't find the beginning point here, because here we go. And the House is back in session.
Gentlelady from North Carolina is recognized for 1 hour.
Mr. Speaker, for the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Frost, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume. During consideration of this resolution, all time yielded is for the purpose of debate only. Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order.
Gentlelady is correct. Chair requests that members desiring to carry on conversation remove those conversations to the cloakroom. Members and staff carrying on conversation, kindly cease audible conversation.
It's worse than a third grade class, isn't it? You can see the guys right in front of them talking. The resolution recites a number of factors to justify military force that turned out to be false, including the alleged weapons of mass destruction.
Gentlelady from North Carolina.
Here we go.
The rule waives all points of order against the conference report to accompany H.R. 5010, the Department of Defense Appropriations Act for fiscal year 2003, and against its consideration. The rule provides that the conference report shall be considered as read. The Defense Appropriations Conference Report provides the tools and the resources for our military to wage an aggressive war against terrorism while defending our nation against ever-changing military threats. I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, but the House is not in order.
Gentlelady is correct. Chair would again request that members and staff in the rear of the
This is a slight diversion into the discussion they were having contemporaneously over the conference report for fiscal, for defense spending during the coming fiscal year, which would include paying for the Iraq War.
Each generation of Americans has been called to defend our freedom. Each time, our forefathers and our mothers have answered the call. Our generation's time of national trial has come. We're being called to stop a new kind of enemy, different from any we have ever fought before. This enemy is patient, building resources and striking where and when we are least prepared. The enemy uses a different method each time. This enemy requires a new kind of defense, and that is what this conference report is attempting to build. I agree with President Bush when he says that our armed forces must be ready to confront every threat from any source that could bring sudden terror and suffering to America. Our forces must be ready to deploy to any point on the globe on short notice. This bill increases operation and maintenance by over $9.7 billion. This nation must have, will have, ready forces that can bring victory to our country and safety to our people. The world's best soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines also deserve the world's best weaponry. And to ensure that, our nation must invest in procurement accounts. This Defense Conference report contains $71.6 billion for procurement. Our nation must give our military the weapons it needs to meet future threats. If the war against terror means that we must find terror wherever it exists, pull it out by its roots, and bring people to justice, our military must have the means to achieve that objective. I'm also pleased this bill makes significant improvements in the quality of life for the men and women who serve in the armed forces. These improvements include a 4.1% military personnel pay raise and targeted pay raises to mid-grade non-commissioned officers. Generous housing allowances that will significantly decrease service personnel's out-of-pocket expenses and access to high-quality health care. We can never pay our men and women in uniform on a scale that matches the magnitude of their sacrifice.
Gentlelady may proceed.
But this bill reflects our respect for their selfless service. I feel very strongly that we need a strong national defense, and we need to be prepared. And indeed we are with this Defense Conference report. The primary responsibility for us as elected officials is to provide for the common defense of our fellow countrymen. And to that end, I urge my colleagues to support the rule and support the underlying bill. Now more than ever, we must improve our national security, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlelady reserves the balance of her time. The chair will receive a message.
Mr. Speaker, a message from the Senate.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Secretary.
I've been directed by the Senate to inform the House that the Senate has passed without amendment H.R. 5531, an act to facilitate famine relief efforts and a comprehensive solution to the war in Sudan.
Okay, we're going to jump out of this for a minute, and I'm going to play some commentary that came from some members of the House who were opposed to the resolution to authorize the use of force against Iraq. This was a press conference that was headed by Representative Dennis Kucinich and aired on C-SPAN.
Ohio Congressman
here we go.
Dennis Kucinich.
Okay. We have several other members who are going to be on their way up, but I think that we could start right now. Thank you all for being here. My calculation, and this is just got a report here, there's a total of 133 people voted against the measure, 126 of which are Democrats. Now there are 204 members of the Democratic caucus. So you do the math, 126 out of 204, I think works out to about 61%. There's a very strong message that is being sent with this vote against the resolution. And that message is that all across this land, Americans are insisting on a peaceful resolution of matters in Iraq. All across this land, Americans are looking towards the United States to be a nation among nations, working through the United Nations to help resolve this crisis. All across this land, people are looking for America to deal with its economic problems and to focus on those and not to get distracted by a war with Iraq. I think that this vote today is a strong testimony to the involvement of so many of the members standing behind me. People like Lloyd Doggett, who worked side by side with me over the last few weeks to try to demonstrate that there was sufficient support for our position in the caucus. Now, you remember a few weeks ago, all of you were reporting there's 19 people opposed to this proposition. You remember, you saw the reports. And then a week later, you said there were 25. And then we announced a few days ago that we knew there were at least 100 who would oppose it. And today, as we stand before you, a total of 133 members have voted against this proposition of preemptive war. I am so proud to stand here with members of our Democratic caucus who did not make this a partisan matter, but who, by their presence, helped to demonstrate that America is being heard from today. And there is an advancing tide for peace in this country. And so, let America speak. Lloyd Doggett.
Dennis, thank you for your leadership. My job was just to try to coordinate our whip count, and we're able to move out of our phone booth now. Every person here played a key role in that whip count. We had opposition, of course, not only from the White House, but from the leadership of both sides of the aisle. And I think that this resolution, as you've noted, bears a lot of resemblance to the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, except in one very significant way, and that is lack of opposition, because there's plenty of opposition. And we view this, I think, as a victory not for us as individuals, but for the millions of concerned Americans who've been out there expressing their opposition, feeling they had no voice in Washington. They have been heard. And I think about 30% of the House, a clear majority of the Democratic caucus, represents a great accomplishment for those Americans who've expressed that concern. And I believe that we are saying again today to the President, we're not opposed to you. We respect you. We support you. But listen to the voices of your better nature. Listen to the voices within your administration and follow the prudent course of securing effective, comprehensive international inspections.
Barbara Lee.
Thank you very much, and let me too thank Congressman Kucinich and Doggett and all of my colleagues here for their enormous amount of work and commitment to ensure that the voices of millions of people are heard in this United States Congress. Today, I believe our vote by those standing here and the additional members who voted against the Bush plan, that vote signifies several things: that many, many people in our country want to see a diplomatic solution to the current crisis and to the issues with regard to Iraq. Secondly, I believe these votes say that there are millions of people who believe that a preemptive, unilateral first strike sets a very dangerous precedent and that takes away our moral authority in the world for a foreign policy that could say to China and Taiwan, to India and Pakistan, Georgia and Russia, that seeking nonviolent solutions, diplomatic solutions to conflict will work. I think 133 members said that today. Finally, I think that our vote today says that there are millions of people who believe that multilateralism and working with the world community is the strategy that the United States should embark upon. That yes, we want to remove and eliminate the weapons of mass destruction throughout the world. And yes, we want to see a peaceful world and secure the world for our children and our children's children. The questions that are still out there could provide us with answers, I think, that we could provide for the American people. Those questions still have not been answered. We could be faced with a conflict of catastrophic proportions, and so I'm very somber today, but I'm very hopeful that the voice of the American people will continue to prevail.
Congresswoman Hilda Solis.
Thank you, Dennis, and I want to thank my colleagues, and I want to thank the public, because last week we made a call out to the public to say contact your members of Congress, and we did that last week before we left. And as a result, this is the kind of influence we've had. People have been calling their members, telling them very clearly we're not satisfied with this resolution, we need more debate. I want to tell you I am very proud that the Hispanic caucus, the number of members that were here to vote today, all voted against this resolution. And that's probably one of the first for us. And you know that members sit on some of these very prestigious committees. So the message is very loud and clear in the Hispanic community. We're very concerned with our youth that will be sent out in this war, if there is one. But more importantly, that we want to have debate. We want to be a part of this. We are a part of America. Don't make decisions about our lives without involving our leadership and people who are elected to represent us. And I want to thank Dennis, and I want to thank the Progressive Caucus, Lloyd Doggett, who was dogging me on this issue. And you know, it's a great experience. It's great to be an American, to be able to speak out. Thank you. Me da bastante gusto estar aquí porque los miembros del caucus hispano han votado contra del presidente y es un mensaje muy fuerte. Somos aquí unidos para partir y hacer unidos en este país, pero queremos hablar más de este tema y es necesario tener líderes hispanos que pueden hablar de parte de la comunidad y no otros que están diciendo cosas que no son de veras. Muchas gracias.
Y muchas gracias por su apoyo, nosotros juntos. John Conyers.
Well, the first thing that we should note is that we represent the majority of the American people. There is little question that most Americans are not in support of giving the President of the United States additional war powers. It was reflected over and over and over again. The second thing that I'm proud of is the fact that of the 38 members of the Congressional Black Caucus, 4 did not support the position that is represented on this podium today. And we're very, very proud of that. And finally, there is an increasing question of what constitutes a patriot. And I think more and more people are beginning to realize that if your opinion is coerced or forced upon you, you're really not acting within the American theory of freedom of speech and freedom of the press. There were so many anguished colleagues, I feel for them, whose heads were bowed, who were already rationalizing why they were unhappy about what they did. But it wasn't their free will vote. And, you know, you can have a framework of democracy, but unless people can walk into a hall as a legislator in any country and vote what they really feel, I think there's a good question about what's happening. And so to the dearest friends I have in the Congress, those 132 other members, I'm very proud to stand here with you all, Dennis.
Thank you very much, John Conyers. Bob Filner of California.
Thank you, Dennis. Bob Filner from San Diego, California. When we first started this, in every one of my speeches, I called this a Gulf of Tonkin resolution in terms of the open-ended authority that it gave the president. But it wasn't the Tonkin Gulf, as Lloyd Doggett said, because 0 congressmen voted against the Tonkin Gulf resolution, and we had 133. So we are already have a base to start with. And I just say to the President of the United States, Mr. President, it is not too late. There is a whiff of Vietnam in the air here. The mail is running 10-to-1 against this war. There have been protests in the street all over America and internationally. There is division coming to America. Mr. President, you said you were a uniter, not a divider. Now is the time to bring us together, because a divided country at a time of war means there's no progress. We learned that in Vietnam. Let's not repeat that mistake again.
Thank you very much. One of the individuals who was very instrumental in organizing this effort was Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky. I want to thank her for her efforts and ask her to step forward.
Thank you, Dennis. I think the number today is 176 people in the House of Representatives who expressed at least some skepticism, if not direct opposition, to allowing the president to go directly into war. There were 155 votes for the Spratt resolution, which said that there had to be a two-step process, and then in addition 21 people who voted no on Spratt who voted no on the final vote. So there are 176 Congress people on both sides of the aisle who said that they did not support unilateral preemptive war now by the President of the United States. I think the reason that the President took to the airwaves on Monday night is because he was hearing what we're hearing. He's hearing from the American people that they do not want to go to war alone. They want to go with the United Nations if we have to go to war at all. That we should be leaders in the international community. I think that he felt that he had to try and energize his base. But since that speech, I've been getting more and more. My stack of mail and emails against this war is now exceeding 3 feet. And of that, 18 letters say that we should go to war. What happened today does not necessitate that we take up arms and go into Iraq. And I think we should be encouraging the American people to continue to do what they've been doing, to contact their members and to contact the President and say, no, we're not going to go it alone, guns blazing. We're going to be leaders by bringing the world community together to disarm Saddam Hussein and to make the world safer, not more dangerous, which is what I believe and what many people believe would be the result of this kind of unilateral action. So I hope the story today won't be, this is a huge, overwhelming victory for the President of the United States and for war, because it is not. I think what we did was surprise some people today. This is against overwhelming conventional wisdom that, oh, everybody's going to be with the President, against overwhelming news reports that it's going to be all for the President, that members of this Congress listened to their constituents, and almost half, or certainly well over a third of this caucus voted no.
Thank you very much. Congresswoman Stephanie Tubbs Jones, and then Mr. Sanders and Barbara Lee, or Sheila Jackson.
I am so pleased and proud of my colleague and neighbor, Dennis Kucinich, and I want to commend him for his leadership on this issue, along with my good friend Barbara Lee and everyone else. One of the things that I would encourage each of you who are listening to take into consideration is that, remember, this president started at the other end. He was, I'm going to go, whether the UN goes with me, whether anybody else goes with me. I have the power, I have the ability to do this without them. And our force, our constant pushing and deliberation and deliberance moved him from, I'm going by myself. He's now going to the UN. He came to Congress seeking our support. And what we need to say to the rest of this country who believes as we believe that peace ought to be given a chance is to keep talking, keep walking, keep going out there calling people and saying to them that peace is the right way. Because if we've moved him from one end of the spectrum to the middle, we can move him closer to the part or the left side of this equation that says that we're the big dog. We're the 800-pound gorilla. And therefore, we can afford to use the power of being at that place to use peace and to use all types of inspections and to use deliberation and diplomacy to resolve this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Congressman Bernie Sanders, and then Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, and then Mr. Serrano, Congressman Serrano.
Thank you, Dennis, for all of your efforts. And let me thank the over 5,000 people in the state of Vermont who emailed, called, and wrote to me and said, do not support legislation that will allow the President of the United States to unleash a unilateral attack against Iraq. Demand that the President work with the United Nations and with the international community to get weapons inspectors into Iraq. That's what the people of Vermont have told me, and poll after poll shows that that is what the people of the United States want. We may have been in the minority today, but I have no doubt that we are representing the vast majority of the people who are scared to death about the possibility that the United States could set a precedent of a unilateral invasion of a country which could trigger disastrous results from China, Russia, and every other country in the world, who will then say, if the United States thinks it can go to war anytime it wants, why can we in China not do the same? We in Russia not do the same. Second point that I want to make is that many of us are hearing from our constituents that maybe instead of talking about Iraq every single day and having the media talking about Iraq every single day, maybe we should be protecting elderly people who have lost their life savings in a declining stock market. Maybe we should be protecting the millions of American workers who have seen their jobs go to China and Mexico. Maybe we should be talking about the fact that our healthcare system is collapsing and insurance rates are going up. And many of us are sick and tired that the White House is not focusing on the issues that reflect the needs and concerns of tens and tens of millions of Americans. What we all believe is that working together with the United Nations, with the international community, we can resolve this problem without a unilateral American invasion.
Sheila Jackson Lee.
Thank you very much. Lloyd, that phone booth was a good start. And I think we should pronounce to the world today that the reflection of those of us who are here are a reflection of America and reflection of patriots. And if I want to craft what the message is of 133 votes, bipartisan votes, Republicans and Democrats, who cast their votes in opposition to this position, it is to unfrighten the American people about the imminency of war or the imminency of a potential threat or a threat directly on their security and their quality of life. And that is what I think we should get to the American people, is that first of all, the President has a right to protect us if necessary. What we were doing in this session of these 3 days was moving a process along with no nexus, no explanation, no facts on the imminent threat to the United States of America. It is key that members of Congress not abdicate their responsibility in order to ensure that there are voices of safety and protection. And so I would say that look at us as we represent the diversity of America, that we come from different parts of this country. There is no doubt that we send young men and women off to war. But the most singular factor that I was concerned with is life or death questions, the loss of hundreds of thousands of innocent young men and women in the United States military and other innocent lives on the basis of making a determination to go to war. For that reason, I voted no and joined my colleagues and thanked them for their leadership, Dennis, to grow this amount of individuals from a small band of people to those who reflected and realized that it is far better to exercise your vote on behalf of saving lives and protecting the Constitution, which clearly says we must have the full authority to declare war on behalf of the United States of America.
Jose Serrano, Jim McDermott, Danny Davis, Maurice Hinchey.
Thank you. I want to touch on a subject here that we usually don't touch at press conferences, but I can't help but be amazed at how many of you covering this for the press are young enough to be my children. My point that the folks you see here lived through Vietnam. We saw it up close. And there's a lot of similarities between this mistake and that mistake. When you go back to your computers, when you go back to edit your tape, take this into consideration, why it is we took the vote we took today. And also, we beg you to do one thing on our behalf. Some will try in the talk shows to say that if you oppose the war, you oppose the troops. Keep in mind that last time, during the Persian Gulf War, the ones who opposed the war supported benefits for the troops, and the ones who supported the war opposed benefits for the troops when they came home. There are similarities there, too. Lastly, all I can say, sarcastically or profoundly, that I've gained incredible more respect for the presidency. The ability to fabricate an issue,
to create a crisis that doesn't exist and to shove it down the throat of a lot of people running against the best wishes and the will of the American people is totally amazement. If I had known this years ago, I would have guided my career to try to run for president. But now I'm not going to pull that off because there's a constitutional case with me. Mr. President, you still have time to pull back, to understand that this is a horrible mistake. If Saddam Hussein is everything you claim he is, when you back him against the wall, he'll behave that way. He hasn't behaved that way yet, and there's still time to stop this madness from taking place.
Jim McDermott.
Mr. President, there's an old saying that you should beware of what you wish for, because you might get it. Now, if you get the power from the House and you get it from the Senate in the next few days to do what you want, to go to war whenever you want, you have an enormous responsibility to the American people, to all the people who will die, to the families who will lose people, and to the millions of Iraqis who will die in that same process. And it's not a light weight that you're taking. And you must consider that those inspections should be given a fair chance to work. You cannot use your Department of State or anybody else to try and obstruct the inspectors going in. They would be in on the 15th of this month, but for your administration saying, we don't want them to go in until we can get a new resolution. Mr. Blix was ready to go, but you went down there, your people went down and met and turned him around and said, wait till we get another resolution. The obstruction of this follows a pattern of 8 years of not trying to solve this solution. Your predecessor took out the inspectors when they were about to conclude their work and give a clean bill of health so that they could lift the sanctions. And the administration, not only your father's, but Mr. Clinton's and now yours, want a regime change. And you've done everything from the administrative level to do that. And you now have the lives of kids from this country. Kids not by a draft, kids who volunteered because they saw it as a way to climb up in the society. There aren't any of the children of people like us, or very few in this Army. It's different than Vietnam. We had all kinds of volunteers, and we also had a lot of draftees like me. This war is a war that you're using people at the bottom of the economic level, mostly, for the soldiers on the line. They're not flying the airplanes. They're on the ground, walking through that depleted uranium down in the south of Iraq. Think carefully, Mr. President. Be careful what you do. Remember, Lyndon Johnson never ran for re-election.
Danny Davis.
I think the message to the American people is simply to stay engaged, stay involved. That's what brought us to the 133 votes here. As long as people are involved, there's the opportunity to change the direction of the president. People, stay engaged, stay involved.
Maurice Hinchey.
Thank you, Dennis. Timely arrival. I just want to say that I think the country is in a very difficult and dangerous period. One of the most difficult and dangerous, perhaps, in our history. The economy is falling back into recession, and we have arrayed against us a very dedicated, devoted, rigid, religious, fundamentalist group that has dedicated themselves to our injury and ultimate destruction if they can bring it about. It's the kind of enemy that we have never seen before. It's unique in our experience. The administration is dealing not at all with the first, not at all with the economic circumstances, not at all with the fact that unemployment is going up, incomes are going down, health care is declining, educational achievement is declining. They're dealing with none of that. And they're dealing very ineptly with the second, which is the al-Qaeda network. What they have done here today with this resolution, and over the course of the last several weeks, is attempted to distract the American people away from the two most serious problems, economic and the religious fundamentalists arrayed against us. We have seen through that, and I think a vast majority of the American people are seeing through it. 133 members of this House cast their vote in opposition to this resolution because they understand the two most difficult problems that we face, and they're dedicated to dealing with them. We can deal with Saddam Hussein and the problem of Iraq through the United Nations and in those ways that will receive the help and sanction of the international community. We need to now get back to dealing with the economy and with the international terrorists.
Thank you very much. One of the individuals who was very active in our effort right from the start was Congressman Inslee of Washington. I want to thank him for being here. Thank you, Congressman Hinchey.
Thanks, Dennis. I hope you know Dennis Kucinich's and Lloyd Doggett's early leadership on this issue when they were very lonely. It took courage to be out front in this regard early. I have two things to say. First, nothing has given me a greater appreciation of the common sense of the American people than the thousands of people who have contacted me and said that it was not consistent with American values to give any president a blank check to start a unilateral, ill-timed, go-it-alone war. And in the midst of the fear, in the midst of the confusion, in the midst of our pain after September 11th, for them to have that innate wisdom shows the value of democracy and listening to the people in the heartland of America, and I heard from thousands of them to that effect. Second, although this 131 votes is not a majority of the House, I hope it has an impact on the occupant of the White House. I hope that it will cause him to listen to the prayers of the American people from all 50 states that are praying that he will see the wisdom of working with the international community and not on a go-it-alone strategy. If those prayers are answered, these 131 votes would have been successful. Thank you, Dennis. I also want to hope that you'll note the contributions to this debate of John Spratt, who showed tremendous leadership in fashioning an alternative resolution which really allowed the American people to understand what this debate was about.
Okay, any questions? And the other members will be up. We'll give them a chance to speak. Go ahead.
Now, the 133 votes against this resolution, when push comes to shove, and if the president decides to go to war, is there a way that you think this figure, 133 against, will influence that decision in practical terms?
With 133 members voting against the resolution, which could set the United States on a path towards war in Iraq, I think it would probably have a tempering effect on the administration to know that those members represent widespread concern across the land about the direction the country's headed. And so I would hope that the administration would take heed and would realize that many Americans are asking for caution to be observed. Yes?
Do you have a sense that perhaps the Democratic leadership in the House perhaps abandoned initially people with concerns like yours, and obviously a great many Democrats and Republicans who have concerns about this vote?
Well, first of all, there's 204 members of the Democratic caucus. 126 Democrats voted opposed to the war. So I think if you do the math, you'll find that what you're looking at is something approaching 61-62%. That's a powerful statement, and I think the leadership certainly understands it's a powerful statement. At the same time, we're Democrats. The nature of our party is that we have disagreements in our party. You know the old saw about I'm not a member of any organized party, I'm a Democrat. Well, it's reflected in votes like this. But there is a strong statement here about Democratic constituencies across the country asking for consideration of their concerns that we not go towards war. And I would also say that there's a lot of Republicans out there who feel the same way. So we did not use this vote to challenge our leadership. That wasn't our intent. At no point has anyone heard any of us challenging the leadership. But on a vote like this, there are 435 leaders. And obviously, you have 126 leaders within the Democratic caucus who saw it differently than our esteemed Mr. Gephardt did. And again, we've conducted ourselves throughout this in a way where we've maintained our friendships despite the fact that we've had strong disagreements. And we continue to do that.
Dennis, can I add something to that?
Please do.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I really think Americans would be pleasantly surprised to see the extent to which individual members exercise their conscience and their conviction. And people had different conscience about this, and I believe the leadership followed their conviction. I believe the president is following his conscience. And this debate was remarkably free of sort of aspersions to anyone else's motivations. And I think it was a good thing for America to have a clean debate in this regard, and I think we achieved that.
Any other questions? If not, thank you. Yes.
Just a little clarification, actually. Now, when these 133 people voted against this resolution, did they actually vote against the war period, or did they vote against the U.S. going it alone?
Well, I think you'll probably find each member having an expression that would characterize an individual position. But I think it's fair to say, based on discussions I've had with many of the members who voted against the resolution, that as we heard from people back home, we heard a desire not to go to war and a desire to work through the United Nations to resolve this peacefully, a belief that Iraq did not cause 9/11 and so should not be punished for it. So there's a commitment to our nation's defense, but it's a commitment to peace as well. And I think as all of you may have been surprised at the large number of votes in opposition, I think the American people won't be surprised, because they've expected to see this reflected based on their aspirations for peaceful resolution of this crisis in Iraq. I want to thank all of you for being here, and again thank Mr. Doggett and Mr. Inslee for their efforts. This truly was a team effort. It takes a lot of work to be able to get the kind of vote that we had, especially when, in the face of the conventional wisdom that we were fighting some kind of a solitary battle to try to get attention. Well, I think today we got the attention not only of the White House, but we got the attention of America. Thank you.
And as it turns out, had the minority leader, Dick Gephardt, forced the issue among Democrats in the House, the 82 who voted yes, had they voted no, coupled with the 6 Republicans and 126 Democrats who voted yes, would have tied it at 215-215, with 2 Republican members and 1 Democratic member not voting. So if they got the call from their leadership to come vote, it would have either lost or won by 1 or 2 votes. Instead, it passed 297 to 133 with 3 no votes. In other words, did not vote. We're going to go back to the House of Representatives now, where they were discussing the resolution. That the press conference we just heard was after the vote, shortly after the vote, almost immediately after the vote. But we're going to hear the discussion leading up to the vote in the House.
Telling them very clearly we are not satisfied with this resolution. We need more debate. I want to tell you I am very proud that the Hispanic caucus, the number of members that were here to vote today, all voted against this resolution. Right. And that's probably one of the first for us. And you know that members sit on some of these very prestigious committees. So the message is very loud and clear in the Hispanic community. We're very concerned with our youth that will be sent out in this war, if there is one, but more importantly that we want to have debate. We want to be a part of this. We are a part of America. Don't make decisions about our lives without involving our leadership and people who are elected to represent us. And I want to thank Dennis, and I want to thank the Progressive Caucus, Lloyd Doggett, who was dogging me on this issue. And you know, it's a great experience. It's great to be in America and to be able to speak out. thank you. Me da bastante gusto estar aquí porque los miembros del caucus hispano han votado contra del presidente y es un mensaje muy fuerte. Somos aquí unidos para partir y hacer unidos en este país, pero queremos hablar más de este tema y es necesario tener líderes hispanos que pueden hablar de parte de la comunidad y no otros que están diciendo cosas que no son de veras. Muchas gracias.
Y muchas gracias por su apoyo, nosotros juntos. John Conyers.
Well, the first thing that we should note is that we represent the majority of the American people. There is little question that most Americans are not in support of giving the President of the United States additional war powers. That was reflected over and over and over again. The second thing that I'm proud of is the fact that of the 38 members of the Congressional Black Caucus, 4 did not support the position that is represented on this podium today. And we're very, very proud of that. And finally, there is an increasing question of what constitutes a patriot. And I think more and more people are beginning to realize that if your opinion is coerced or forced upon you, you're really not acting within the American theory of freedom of speech and freedom of the press. There were so many anguished colleagues, I feel for them, whose heads were bowed, who were already rationalizing why they were unhappy about what they did. But it wasn't their free will vote. And, you know, you can have a framework of democracy, but unless people can walk into a hall as a legislator in any country and vote what they really feel, I think there's a good question about what's happening. And so to the dearest friends I have in the Congress, those 132 other members, I'm very proud to stand here with you all, Dennis.
Thank you very much, John Conyers. Bob Filner of California.
Thank you, Dennis. Bob Filner from San Diego, California. When we first started this, in every one of my speeches, I called this a Gulf of Tonkin resolution in terms of the open-ended authority that it gave the president. But it wasn't the Tonkin Gulf, as Lloyd Doggett said, because 0 congressmen voted against the Tonkin Gulf resolution, and we had 133. So we are already have a base to start with. And I just say to the President of the United States, Mr. President, it is not too late. There is a whiff of Vietnam in the air here. The mail is running 10-to-1 against this war. There have been protests in the street all over America and internationally. There is division coming to America. Mr. President, you said you were a uniter, not a divider. Now is the time to bring us together, because a divided country at a time of war means there's no progress. We learned that in Vietnam. Let's not repeat that mistake again.
Thank you very much.
We're going to leave that and go to the discussion back on the floor of the Congress. I think we're right about here. What's this on? No, that's on military construction spending. And let's go to the Senate, because there was a lot of fun stuff going on there, too. So let's begin right here.
Not only would I be glad to start using the time now, but when Senator Byrd returns to the floor, I'd be glad to interrupt my speech for Senator Byrd to speak. Madam President.
The Senator from Arizona.
Madam President, I proceed with my statement. If Senator Byrd arrives on the floor, I will interrupt it and yield to Senator Byrd for
Senator will suspend before you start. The Senate will be in order. The Senator from Arizona.
That's Senator Marie.
Madam President, in the history of nations, greatness is forged or opportunity squandered, not by natural evolution nor by the hand of mysterious fate, but by decision leaders make in times of potential or imminent peril. A common view in America is that these decisions are thrust on us, the world wars, Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. A common view in America is that these decisions are thrust on us, the world wars, Iraq's invasion of Kuwait, the attacks of September 11th, and we find meaning and honor in our response. As Americans, meaning and honor in our response. As Americans, that response is guided by faith in our founding principles, in our love of freedom, and the blessings of justice. Yet leaders always have choices, and history teaches that hard choices deferred. Appeasing Hitler, choosing not to deter Saddam Hussein in 1990, failing to act sooner against al-Qaeda, often bring about the very circumstances we wish to avoid by deferring action, requiring us to react in freedom's defense. America's leaders today have a choice. It will determine whether our people live in fear behind walls that have already been breached as our enemies plan our defeat in time we have given them to do it. It will answer the fundamental question about America's purpose in the world, whether we perceive our beliefs to be uniquely American principles or universal values. For if they are so dear to us that we believe all people have the right to enjoy them, we should be willing to stand up for them wherever they are threatened. It will reveal whether we are brave and wise or reluctant, self-doubting, and in retreat from a world that still in its cruelest corners possesses a merciless hostility to our values and interests. It will test us, as did September 11th, except that we can choose to engage the enemy on our terms rather than wait for the battle to be brought to us. Our choice is whether to assume history's burden and make the world safe from a megalomaniacal tyrant whose cruelty and offense to the norms of civilization are infamous, or whether to wait for this man, armed with the world's worst weapons and willing and able to use them to make history for us. It's a question of whether preemptive action to defeat an adversary whose designs would imperil our vital interests is not only appropriate but moral, and whether our morality and security give us cause to fire the first shot in this battle. It will help determine whether the greater Middle East will progress toward possession of the values Americans hold to be universal, or whether the Arab and Islamic worlds will be further influenced by a tyrant whose intent is to breed his own virulent anti-Americanism in all who fall under his influence and use that influence to hurt us gravely. The government of Saddam Hussein is a clear and present danger to the United States of America. Would that he would be just another Arab dictator, pumping oil and repressing his people, but satisfied with his personal circumstances within the confines of his country's borders. That situation alone would offend our sense of justice and compel us to militate for a regime change, but by means short of preemptive military action. But Saddam Hussein has shown he has greater ambitions. His ambitions lie not in Baghdad or Tikrit or Basra, but in the deserts of Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. They lie in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, where he sponsors suicide bombings by Palestinians that he calls martyrs, and the civilized world calls terrorists, using murder by proxy to advance his aspirations to lead the Arab world and fan hatred of Israel, America, and the universal ideal of freedom. These ambitions have led him to attack his sovereign neighbors, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Israel, Iran, and Bahrain. His will to power has so affected his judgment that he has started 2 major wars and lost them, each time imperiling his own grip on power. His moral code is so spare that he has gassed his own people, horror the world thought it had left behind at Auschwitz and Treblinka. We are told that he enjoys watching video of his opponents being tortured for fun. He kills not just his political opponents, but their families, cruelly. He has developed stocks of germs and toxins in sufficient quantities to kill the entire population of the earth multiple times. He's placed weapons laden with these poisons on alert to fire at his neighbors within minutes, not hours, and has devolved military authority to fire them to subordinates. He develops nuclear weapons with which he would hold his neighbors and us hostage. No, this is not just another self-serving, oil-rich potentate. He's the worst kind of modern-day tyrant, a conscienceless murderer who aspires to omnipotence, who has repeatedly committed irrational acts in seizing power. Given this reality, containment and deterrence and international inspections will work no better than the Maginot Line did 62 years ago. He has unrepentantly violated 16 United Nations Security Council resolutions, defying the will of the international community so consistently, so compulsively, so completely, that no leader who professes allegiance to the values of the United Nations was formed to uphold can sanction his audacity. His defiance, if not ended, is a threat to every nation that claims membership in the civilized world by virtue of its respect for law and fundamental human values. Because Saddam Hussein respects neither law nor values, advocating inspections of his weapons facilities as an alternative to war posits a false choice between ending the threat he poses peaceably or by force of arms. His character, his ambition, and his record make clear that he will never accept the intrusive inspections that, by depriving him of his arsenal of dangerous weapons, would deprive him of his power. This power gives him international stature, feeds his fantasy of being a Saladin of our time, and sustains his ability to repress his people and thus remain the ruler of Iraq. Saddam Hussein is on a crash course to construct a nuclear weapon, as he was in 1981 when Israel preemptively destroyed his reactor at Assarat, enabling U.S. forces to go into Iraq a decade later without the threat of nuclear attack, and as he was in 1990 when he thought development of such a weapon, if completed in time, would have deterred American military action against him, allowing him to secure his control over his neighbors and dominate the region. Saddam has masterfully manipulated the international weapons inspections regime over the course of a decade, enabling him to remain in power with his weapons of mass destruction intact and growing in lethality. He knows how to play for time and how to exploit divisions within the international community, greased by the prospect of oil contracts for friendly foreign powers. His calculated ambiguity about his willingness to accept a new inspections regime are intended to stave off military attack until such time as he is able to deter it through deployment of an Iraqi nuclear weapon. He is using opponents of war in America, including well-intentioned individuals who honestly believe inspections represent an alternative to war, to advance his own ends, sowing divisions within our ranks that encourage reasonable people to believe he may be sincere. He is not. He's had 10 years to prove otherwise, and he has transparently failed. His regime would be secure if he would only acquiesce to the international community's demands to disarm. He has not. It is Saddam Hussein who puts his own regime at risk by developing these weapons. The burden is not on America to justify going to war. The burden is Saddam Hussein's to justify why his regime should continue to exist as long as its continuing existence threatens the world. Giving peace a chance only gives Saddam Hussein more time to prepare for war on his terms at a time of his choosing, in pursuit of ambitions that will only grow as his power to achieve them grows. American credibility, American security, and the future of the United Nations Security Council rest on the will of the United States to enforce the legitimate demands of the international community for Iraq's disarmament by means that match the menace posed by his ambitions. Saddam Hussein's regime cannot be contained, deterred, or accommodated. Containment has failed. It failed to halt Saddam's attacks on 5 sovereign nations. The sanctions regime has collapsed. As long as Saddam remains in power, he will be able to deceive, bribe, intimidate, and attack his way out of any containment scheme. Some say we can deter Saddam Hussein, even though deterrence has failed utterly in the past. I fail to see how waiting for some unspecified period of time, allowing Saddam's nuclear ambitions to go unchecked, will ever result in a stable deterrence regime. Not only would deterrence condemn the Iraqi people to more unspeakable tyranny, it would condemn Saddam's neighbors to perpetual instability. And once Iraq's nuclear ambitions are realized, no serious person could expect the Iraqi threat to diminish. As for accommodation, I am reminded of Winston Churchill's characterization of appeasement, continually feeding the alligator in the hope that he will eat you last. I do not believe the threat posed by Saddam Hussein's regime will be eliminated until he is removed from power. Congress made the same point in 1998 when we passed the Iraq Liberation Act, which made regime change in Baghdad a priority of American policy. Our regional allies who oppose using force against Saddam Hussein warn of uncontrollable popular hostility to an American attack on Iraq. But what would really be the effect on Arab populations of seeing other Arabs liberated from oppression? Most Iraqi soldiers will not willingly die for Saddam Hussein. Far from fighting to the last Iraqi, the people of that tortured society will surely dance on the regime's grave. I wish the Bush administration and its predecessor had given more serious support to internal and external Iraqi opposition than has been the case. But it's a safe assumption that Iraqis will be grateful to whoever is responsible for securing their freedom. Perhaps that is what truly concerns some of our Gulf War allies, that among the consequences of regime change in Iraq might be a stronger demand for self-determination from their own people. I commend the President for making a strong case for bringing Iraq into compliance with its international obligations to the United Nations. The Security Council bears the responsibility for enforcing the obligations it has imposed on Iraq in order to uphold international peace and security. The President was right to tell our friends and allies on the Council that if it does not act, America will. Diplomacy is important, and I welcome the diplomatic campaign the administration is waging to solicit the support of other nations. At the end of the day, we will not wage this war alone. Many nations are threatened by Saddam Hussein's rule, and many nations have a stake in the new order that would be built atop the ruins of Saddam Hussein's fascist state. Our friends and allies will help us construct this new order, and we should welcome that. Our friends and allies must know that we do not target Saddam's regime simply because he's a bad man, even although his continuation of his tyranny is a rebuke to every decent value of humanity. We contemplate military action to end his rule because allowing him to remain in power with the resources at his disposal would intolerably and inevitably risk American interests in a region of the world where threats to those interests affect the whole world. For the United States to accept Saddam's continued rule is to acquiesce to the certain prospect of strategic blackmail when soon Saddam wields a nuclear weapon and threatens the destruction of Israel or the invasion of Saudi Arabia, or demands the withdrawal of all American forces from the region, and America finds itself forced to respond at much more terrible cost than we would pay today. Failure now to make the choice to remove Saddam Hussein from power will leave us with few choices later, when Saddam's inevitable acquisition of nuclear weapons will make it much more dangerous to defend our friends and interests in the region. It will permit Saddam to control much of the region and to weld its resources in ways that can only weaken America's position. It will put Israel's very survival at risk, with moral consequences no American can welcome. Failure to end the danger posed by Saddam Hussein's Iraq makes it more likely that the interaction we believe to have occurred between members of al-Qaeda and Saddam's regime may increasingly take the form of active cooperation to target the United States. We live in a world in which international terrorists continue to this day to plot mass murder in America. Saddam Hussein unquestionably has strong incentives to cooperate with al-Qaeda. Whatever they may or may not have in common, their overwhelming hostility to America and rejection of any moral code suggests that collaboration against us would be a natural. It is all too imaginable. Whether or not it has yet happened, the odds favor it, and they are not odds the United States can accept. To those who argue that America's threat to Saddam's rule makes it more likely that he would collaborate with terrorists to attack our homeland, I would ask, how can we sanction the continued existence of a regime whose ruler has the capability to inflict such damage on us and would even consider doing so? Standing by while an odious regime with a history of support for terrorism develops weapons whose use by terrorists could literally kill millions of Americans is not a choice. It is an abdication. In this new era, preventive action to target rogue regimes is not only imaginable, but necessary. Who would not have attacked Osama bin Laden's network before September 11th had we realized that his intentions to bring harm to America were matched by the capability to do so? Who would not have heeded Churchill's call to stand up to Adolf Hitler in the 1930s while Europe slept and appeasement fed the greatest threat to Western civilization the world had ever known? Who would not have supported Israel's bombing of Iraq's nuclear reactor in 1981 had we then known, as Israel knew, that Saddam was on the verge of developing the bomb? Opponents of this resolution offer many questions that are designed to persuade the President to wait before moving against Saddam Hussein. They have every right to do so, but there is one question I don't want to be asked in the months and years ahead. Why did you give Saddam Hussein time to harm us? Weighing the cost of inaction is as important as chronicling the costs of action in blood and treasure as we prepare to confront Iraq in 2002. In an age of weapons of mass destruction and global terrorists bent on acquiring those weapons, the cost of inaction could well be catastrophic. As we hold this debate today, this future is not preordained. We have choices. I hope we make the right one. Politics has no place in this debate. Voting for a course of action that will send young Americans off to fight and die for their country is the most solemn responsibility every member of this Congress will undertake. Those of us who have the honor of bearing that responsibility must weigh our words and consult our consciences carefully. By voting to give the President the authority to wage war, we assume and share his responsibility for the war's outcome. Others have neither that burden nor that privilege. We have a choice. The men and women who wear the uniform of our country and who might lose their lives in service to our cause do not. They will do their duty as we see fit to define it for them. We have a responsibility to these men and women to judge responsibly when our security is so threatened that we must call on them to uphold their oath to defend it. When we call them to serve, they will make us proud. We should strive to make them proud by showing deliberation, judgment, and statesmanship in the debate that will determine their mission. There is no such thing as a Democrat or Republican war. We vote on this resolution in the same way brave young men and women in uniform will fight and die as a result of our vote. As Americans, the freedom and security Americans will continue to enjoy as history's greatest nation will be their legacy and their honor. They will do their duty. Ours lies before us. Its outcome will determine America's course in this new century, in an age when waiting for imminence of attack is catastrophic. In this age, liberating oppressed peoples from the tyranny of those who would do us harm serves not only narrow American interests, but the ordered progress of freedom. The global success of liberty is America's greatest strategic interest, as well as its most compelling moral argument. All our other interests are served in that cause. In it rests our faith in the greatness of America, the last best hope of Earth. What ensures our success in this long struggle against terrorism and rogue leaders who conspire against us is that our military strength is surpassed only by the strength of our ideals. Our enemies are weaker than we are in men and arms, but weaker still in causes. They fight to express an irrational hatred for all that is good in humanity, a hatred that has fallen time and again to the armies and ideals of the righteous. We will fight for love of freedom and justice, a love that is invincible. We will never surrender. They will. All we must do is stay true to our faith.
I was consent to speak.
The Senator from Nevada.
Mr. President, before the Senator from West Virginia begins his remarks and while he's on the floor, I want to say something publicly that I should have said privately, but the time was not appropriate. And that is, I know a little bit about the rules of the Senate here, but very little compared, as I indicated yesterday, to the Senator from West Virginia. I'm not sure everyone appreciates how far along we are in this. This is a very important resolution we're debating, no matter what side of the resolution you're on. The Senator from West Virginia has expressed his thoughts now for almost a week on this amendment, off and on. We would not, though, be in a position we are today to finish this sometime tonight, but for the Senator from West Virginia. The Senator from West Virginia, my younger days when I would be involved in things physical, I have to tell you, there isn't anybody I would like to have next to me than the Senator from West Virginia, because he's a fighter. I've never come across many fighters like the President Pro Tem of the Senate. I just want to express my personal appreciation, and for all of the United States senators, for the Senator allowing us to be in the position we are in today, that we can finish this tonight. The Senator from West Virginia has forgotten more about Senate rules than I'll ever know. And I am so, I'm searching for words to express my admiration and respect for the Senator from West Virginia. When he's a fighter, but he's a fair fighter.
He voted for the resolution, by the way, to go to war.
Always is willing to see the other side of the picture, even though he may not agree. And I just want to say, Senator Byrd, that you've made my life and that of the United States Senate, while interesting today, a lot easier than it could have been, and you've accomplished everything you could. No one in the world could have expressed themselves in the sincerity of their feelings and their love of the country and the Constitution than you have. And I say again, thank you for allowing us to be in the situation we're in here today.
Mr. President, could I add to the comments of the Senator of Nevada? I always find, from my days in trying to enact a line-item veto, the days when the Senator from West Virginia was the majority leader, that he's always treated me with the utmost courtesy and consideration. In all of my encounters, I've found to be incredibly enlightening, very educational, and occasionally frustrating. And I would like to thank Senator Byrd for setting the tone and the tenor of this debate at a level that I think was important to maintain, and one which I think all members of the Senate, no matter which side they are on this issue, can be proud as we look back at this debate and this very important resolution that's being considered. So I thank the Senator from West Virginia, and I look forward to hearing him for the next couple of hours. I thank the chair. Madam President, how much time did I have remaining on my time?
8 minutes.
Could I reserve that time? I ask unanimous consent to reserve the remainder of my time for Senator Bai, who was one of the original co-sponsors.
Without objection.
I yield the floor.
The senator from West Virginia.
Madam President, I wish to begin. I read this quote. Naturally, the common people don't want war. But, after all, it is the leaders of a country who determine the policy, and it is always a simple matter to drag the people along, whether it is a democracy or a fascist dictatorship, or a parliament or a communist dictatorship. Voice or no voice, the people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. That is easy. All you have to do is tell them they're being attacked and denounce the pacifists for a lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same in every country. Herman, Goering, 1893, 1946, Field Marshal, German Army, founder of the Gestapo, president of the Reichstag, Nazi Parliament, and convicted war criminal, speech, 1934. Madam President, the moving finger writes, and having writ, moves on. Nor all thy piety nor wit can lure it back to cancel half a line, nor all thy tears wash out a word of it. So said the Persian poet Omar Khayyam in the 11th century. And so I say today, the Senate has made clear its intentions on the Iraq resolution. There is no doubt, there is no question. The Senate has made its intentions indubitably clear. The outcome is certain. The ending has been scripted. The Senate will vote, and the Iraq resolution will pass. I continue to believe that the Senate, in following this preordained course of action, will be doing a grave disservice to the nation and to the Constitution on which it was founded. In the newly published National Security Strategy of the United States, the document which I hold in my hand, the National Security Strategy of the United States of America, date September 2002. This is the document, Madam President, in which the President of the United States outlines the unprecedented policy of preemptive deterrence, which the Iraq resolution will implement. The President asserts, let me find it on page 3 of this document. This is the President's document. On page 3, I find this paragraph. My fingers, my hands still tremble, but my heart still throbs with my love for this Constitution. But on page 3 of the document, I think that's where I last saw what I'm looking for. In any event, if I don't find it here, I can tell you what it says. The President asserts in this document that the Constitution has served us well. There you have it, 31 pages. And that is the only reference to the Constitution of the United States that is made in this document, titled The National Security Strategy of the United States of America. He asserts that the Constitution has served us well. That's it. That's the alpha and the omega of the reference to the Constitution. This great Constitution of the United States, which creates the presidency of the United States, which creates a bicameral legislative body, which creates the judicial branch of this great nation, provides for it. That's all it says about the Constitution. He asserts that the Constitution has served it well. And note, too, that the word Constitution, as mentioned in the President's document, is in lowercase. It doesn't begin with a capital letter. It begins with a lowercase letter. The Constitution. Well, I have a Constitution. The senator from New Mexico has a Constitution. His Constitution, which was given to him by his Roman ancestral forebears, that's his Constitution. He's strong. He's weak. He has strong mental processes. He has a good heart. Or whatever it is, his Constitution, lowercase. But, Madam President, this Constitution is with a capital C. But this administration doesn't believe that it merits a capital C either. And only mentions, as I say, one time in passing that the Constitution has served us well. Now that apparently is what this administration thinks of the Constitution. Constitution as though it were some dusty relic of the past that needs to be eulogized before it is retired. Relic of the past that needs to be eulogized before it is retired. And so it says, the Constitution has served us well. Well, Mr. President, he is wrong about that. The Constitution is no more dated in the principles that it establishes than is this great book that I treasure above all books. This great book, I'm sorry the desk isn't quite large enough, but it will suffice. Here it is. This book, right here it is. He is wrong. The President is wrong. The Constitution is no more dated in the principles it established than is the Holy Bible. The Constitution continues to serve us well if only we will take the time to heed it. And I'm deeply disappointed that this Senate, in which I have believed for all these many years that God and the people of West Virginia have blessed me to experience in this great body, 44 years, come next January the 3rd. And so I'm deeply disappointed that the Senate is not heeding the imperatives of the Constitution and is instead poised to hand off to the President of the United States the exclusive power of Congress to determine matters of war and peace, to declare war. I do not, in my heart, believe that this is what the American people expect of the Senate. I'm deeply disappointed that the Senate, I've had many occasions in which to stand and laud the Senate and to renew my expression of deep belief in the Senate of the United States as an institution. I've done that many times. But I am deeply disappointed that the Senate is not heeding the imperatives of the Constitution and is instead poised, as I say, to hand over to the President the exclusive power of Congress to determine matters of war and peace. And I do not, in my heart, believe that this is what the American people expect of the Senate. Mr. President, I have heard from tens of thousands of people from all across this country of ours, people from every state in the Union, from New Mexico to Florida to California to the state of Washington to the state of Wisconsin, Minnesota, West Virginia, New York, and all in between. I have heard from thousands of Americans who have urged me to keep up the fight. 50,000, almost 50,000 email letters within the last 5 days. And more than 18,000 telephone calls to my office in the last 5 days, urging me to keep up the fight. So they're listening, and they want to hear more. And if senators don't think for a moment that the people are listening, senators are mistaken. The people are listening. They want to be informed. They have questions that they want answered. And when I came to this body, we didn't have televised coverage here. We didn't have a radio. We didn't even have radio coverage of the debates in this Senate. I can remember that when a Senate stood to his feet, other senators gathered close, moved up closer in the seats to listen to that senator. We had no public address system in this chamber. But they were being informed by the Senate debates. The people were being educated, informed as to the great issues of the day. And the Senate was an institution which did inform the people. We spent days upon days on the great issues that came before this Senate. More than 100 days, for example, on the Civil Rights Act of 1964. More than 100 days. This institution did its duty to the American people by informing them of the issues of the day and by debating those issues, Republicans and Democrats. The aisle was not as wide in those days as it is now. Sometimes I think it's a great canyon here a great chasm that separates the Democratic from the Republican Party in the Senate. But not so then. We disagreed from time to time. But I could remember, I could call off, if I were to take the time now, I could call the names of the faces who in my dreams come back to me. The faces that sat in those seats years ago, decades ago. They were men. Only one woman at that time, that was Margaret Chase Smith of Maine. But senators, Republicans and Democrats joined in informing the people through the process of debate. And I'm only one senator from a very small state. And yet, as I say, within the past week, I have received nearly 20,000 telephone calls and nearly 50,000 emails supporting the position that I have taken on this floor. And this is not counting the calls and the emails that have come into my state office in Charleston, West Virginia. I want all of those people across America, out there across the plains, to the Great Rockies, across the Mississippi, and to the Pacific Coast, from the Gulf Coast to the Canadian border. I want all of those people who took the time to contact me to know how their words have strengthened and heartened me and sustained me in my feeble efforts here to turn the tide of opinion in the Senate. The iron will of one stout heart shall make 1,000 quail. These are my heroes, the people out there who've called, who've written, and who have told me in person as I've walked across the street. They're my heroes. And I will never forget the remarkable courage and patriotism that reverberated in the fervor of their messages. I gave them hope because they love this country. And they love this Constitution. Senators all know that. The people out there love this Constitution. They love this Constitution. The people out there do. So they're my heroes. As the Apostle Paul, that great apostle, said, I have fought a good fight. I have finished the course. I have kept the faith. There are Americans all across this country, in every state of this union, who have joined in spirit with me and with a small band of like-minded senators in fighting the good fight. We could stay here on this floor and continue to fight. They say, well, we might stay here till 4:30 in the morning. Come on. Come on. I'm thinking of the words of Fitzjames in The Lady of the Lake when he stood there before Broderick and said, come one, come all, this rock shall fly from its firm base as soon as I. So come on, let's see the clock turn 4:30 in the morning. Who cares what time it is, as long as we're speaking for our country. So I say to the distinguished senator who presides over this chamber tonight, whose forebear, an ancestral relative, signed his name at the Constitutional Convention on September 17, 1787. His name was Dayton. Dayton, Jonathan Dayton. And this is his relative who presides over the Senate at this moment. So, we could continue this fight. Let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, there are several checkpoints, I'll call them checkpoints, at which under the rules I could cause the Senate to have to go through another cloture and another 72 hours. I could do that. And I would have no hesitancy, not any, in doing it if I did not know that the Senate has already spoken. There is a point at which it becomes time to accept reality and to regroup. It is clear that we have lost this battle in the Senate. The next front is the White House. And I urge all those people who are following the debate out there and who have encouraged me in my efforts and have encouraged the other senators who have stayed with me firmly, without faltering, without fainting, and without wavering. I urge the people to keep on in their behalf who have encouraged us in our efforts. I urge them to turn their attention to the President of the United States. Call him, write him, email him, urge him to heed the Constitution and not short-circuit this Constitution by exercising the broad grant of authority that the Iraq resolution provides. The President has said on many occasions that he has not yet made up his mind to go to war. Ha, ha. And here we are, we've been stampeded into this moment when we will soon approve this resolution. And let me say again, there are several checkpoints at which we could have played this record over and over and again. For example, the title of the resolution could be amended. How about that? And then there's going to be a House resolution come over to this body. And there's going to be a request, I suppose, after the Senate votes on that resolution, a request to insert the words of the Senate, which are likewise the same words, so that it will have a House number. And there would have been a place. I won't go through all these places. But we could fight on. No, we wouldn't finish at 4:30 tomorrow morning. We wouldn't finish it at 4:30 the next morning if we wanted to. I hope that the leadership and the senators will all understand that. I'm not bragging. Dizzy Dean said it's all right to brag if you've done it. We can do that. We can do that. But what good would it do? What good would it do? The course of destiny has already been set by this Senate. So, the President has said on many occasions that he has not made up his mind to go to war. When he does make up his mind, if he does, then he should come back to Congress and seek formal authorization. Let those high-powered lawyers of the White House tell him otherwise. They're going to stand by their client, I suppose. But they didn't go to the same law school I went to. They probably didn't have to work as hard as I had to work. Their wives may not have worked as hard to put me through law school as my wife. And well, so much for that. Let him come back to the Congress for authorization. Now, Mr. President, I continue to have faith in our system of government. It works. I continue to have faith in the basic values that shape this country, this nation. Ours was a great country before it became a great nation. Those values do not include striking first at other countries, at other nations. Those values do not include using our position as the strongest and most formidable nation in the world to bully and intimidate other nations. There are no preemptive strikes in the language of the Constitution. I don't care what other senators say. Those values do not include putting other nations on an enemy's list so that we can justify preemptive military strikes. Were I not to believe in the inherent ability of the Constitution to withstand the folly of such actions as the Senate is about to take, I would not stop fighting. Yeah, he's 85. 85. I'll be 85 and 85 years old. 41 days from now, if the good Lord lets me live. But don't you think for a moment I can't stand on this floor all the rest of this night. I like to fight when I'm fighting for the Constitution and for this institution. I'll fight until I drop. Yeah, I'll fight until they hack my flesh to the bone. And I would fight with every fiber in my body, every ounce of my energy, with every parliamentary tool at my disposal, and there are parliamentary tools at my disposal. Don't you ever think there aren't. But I do believe that the Constitution will weather this storm. The Senate will weather the storm as well. But I only hope that when the tempest passes, senators will reflect upon the ramifications of what they've done and understand the damage that has been inflicted on the Constitution of the United States. Now, those people out there believe in the Constitution. And I've been very disappointed to have stood on my feet, an 85-year-old man, standing on his feet and pleading with his colleagues to stand up for the Constitution. I've been disappointed that some of them seem not to have listened at all. That's a real disappointment. It isn't Robert C. Byrd that counts. It's the Constitution of the United States. And but for that Constitution, they wouldn't be here, I wouldn't be here, and you, Mr. President, would not be here. It's that Constitution. And we all take an oath, a solemn oath, to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And the greatest oration that was ever delivered in the history of mankind, the oration on the crown, delivered in the year 331 BC by Demosthenes. And in his denunciation of Aeschines, he asked this question: who deceives the state? Who deceives the state? He answered his own question by saying, he, the man who does not speak what he thinks. Who deceives the state? The man who does not speak what he thinks. And so, Mr. President, I believe we ought to speak what we think. Political party means nothing, absolutely nothing to me in comparison with this Constitution of the United States, which I hold in my hand. It means nothing. Political party means nothing to me in comparison with this great old book which our mothers read. the Holy Bible. And so, it seems to me that in this debate, thinking about the 50,000 emails that have come to this country boy from the hills of West Virginia, 50,000 emails, and almost 20,000 telephone calls. My wonderful staff have been hard-pressed to take all these calls and log them in. But the American people seem to have a better understanding of the Constitution than do those who are elected to represent them. Now, that's a shame, isn't it? I feel sorry for some of my colleagues. I love them. Bless their hearts, I love them. I forgive them. But you might as well talk to the ocean. I might as well speak to the waves as they come in the tides that rise and fall. Might as well speak to the waves, as did King Canute, as to speak to some of my colleagues. They won't hear me. And it isn't because it's Robert Byrd. They just don't want to hear about that Constitution. That's what these people are writing me about. Perhaps it is that their understanding, the understanding of the people, the great mass of people out there, it may be that their understanding of the Constitution has not yet filtered through the prism of election year politics. That's it. Election year politics. I believe that the American people have a better understanding of what the Senate is about to do, a greater respect for the inherent powers of the Constitution, and a greater comprehension of the far-reaching consequences of this resolution, a greater comprehension than do most of their leaders. And Mr. President, I thank my colleagues who have allowed me to express at considerable length my reasons for opposing the resolution. And I thank those senators, like the senator who presides over the Senate at this very moment. I thank those senators who have stood with me in my fight for the Constitution and for this institution and for that provision in the Constitution that says Congress shall have power to declare war. I thank those senators who have engaged in thoughtful debate with me. I thank Senator McCain. I thank Senator Warner. I thank these men. They've stood up for what they believe. And they've stood up for this administration. The only difference is I would stand for no administration. None. When it comes to this Constitution. If the administration took a position opposite to that Constitution, forget it. I don't care if it's a Democrat. I do not believe that the Senate has given enough time or enough consideration to the question of handing the President unchecked authority to usurp the Constitution and declare war on Iraq. I have no brief for Iraq. But I accept the futility of continuing to fight on this front. So I could keep us here all night tonight. I know that there'd be other senators who would stand with me. Other senators believe as I do. I could keep us here tomorrow. I could keep us here through Saturday. I would hope we wouldn't be in on Sunday. That's the Sabbath day. But come back on next Tuesday, have at it again. Until the flesh from my bones be hacked. But I say to the people of America, to those who have encouraged other senators and me to uphold the principles of the Constitution, keep up the fight. Keep fighting for what is right. Let your voices be heard. Why do you think George Washington crossed the Delaware? May I say to my good friend from Delaware, Joe Biden, my esteemed friend, my esteemed colleague. He crossed the Delaware, may I say to my friend Fred Thompson, Senator Fred Thompson. We're going to soon miss him. I like him. I like him. He always speaks with great passion and fervor, and he's always respectful of other senators. He was here during the days of Sam Ervin, Howard Baker, the days of Watergate. That senator from Tennessee. But let me say that I will always listen to you, the people out there, and I hope the President will begin to listen to you. And Mr. President, if the President really wants to do something for Homeland Security, for this country, let him help to fight the war at home. This week, Mr. President, we will soon be passing another CR. And time again, the President's Attorney General and his Director of Homeland Security have put the nation on notice that there is an imminent threat of another terrorist attack to our homeland. And from time to time, they have even identified the most likely targets, such as our nuclear power plants, our transportation infrastructure, our nation's monuments, our embassies. They have told our citizens to be vigilant about this imminent risk. What has the President done to respond to this imminent risk of terrorist attack on our nation's shores? The President has proposed to create a new bureaucracy. He has proposed to move boxes around on an organizational flow chart. He has proposed to create the second largest domestic agency in the history of the Republic. Even the President recognizes that actually creating the new Department of Homeland Security will take at least 1 year. Well, I tell you, my friends, if I ever saw a good lawyer, he sits right here on the back row right now. That senator from Tennessee, Fred Thompson. Why do I say that? Because he made the most rousing defense of this sorry resolution that's before the Senate, and on which we will soon vote. The most rousing defense of it, and yet he's against it. He's against it. Now that's what I call a good lawyer. Makes a rousing defense of this thing which he hates. Even the President recognizes that actually creating the new Department of Homeland Security will take at least 1 year. The GAO has said that it will take at least 5 to 10 years for a new department to be effective. So while our citizens are facing this imminent risk, under the President's proposal, the agencies responsible for securing our borders, such as the Customs Service, the Immigration and Naturalization Service, and the Coast Guard, will spend the next year or more figuring out whom they work for, whom they work with. Instead of focusing on their mission, our border agencies and inspectors will be wondering whether their units will be reorganized or transferred to new locations, and they will be wondering where their phones are, where their computers are, whether their jobs are going to be eliminated. And what will be happening in the meantime? Who will be keeping the store to watch the terrorists? Reorganizing our bureaucracy will not improve our nation's immediate capacity to deter or respond to the imminent threat of a terrorist attack. Since September 11, the Senate Appropriations Committee has focused on providing immediate resources to federal, state, and local agencies and first responders in order to improve our capacity to respond to this evolving threat. On September 14, 2001, just 3 days after the horrific attacks on September 11, Congress approved $40 billion. $40 billion. That's $40 for every day since Jesus Christ was born. Congress approved $40 billion, including $9.8 billion for Homeland Defense. Resources were provided to the FBI to hire more agents and to improve their computers, to state and local governments to improve the capacity of our hospitals and clinics to respond to chemical or biological weapons attacks, to state and local governments to train and equip our law enforcement and fire personnel to respond to attacks, for HHS to purchase smallpox vaccine, for USDA and FDA to protect our food safety, to the Postal Service to purchase equipment that can protect the mail. Where you been, Mr. President? That's what Congress did. That's what we did. For the FAA to secure cockpits and to improve the security of our airports, to the Department of Transportation for port security, to the Energy Department to help secure our nuclear facilities, and to Customs and INS for additional border security inspectors and agencies, and for improved training and equipment. Hear me! To listen to the President, he's the only man, he's the only person been doing anything, or thinking anything about Homeland Security. Here's the great Congress of the United States that's been providing monies for the defense of our country. Despite objections from the White House, Congress was able to increase funding for Homeland Security programs by $3.9 billion. Where have you been, Mr. President? You want to do something? Do something here at home. On November 14, 2001, Senate Democrats supported the inclusion of $15 billion for Homeland Security in an economic stimulus package, including $4 billion for bioterrorism and food safety. Get that? $4.6 billion for law enforcement and responsive initiatives. Get that? $3.2 billion for transportation security. Get that? And $3 billion for other Homeland Security programs, including mail screening and protection for nuclear plants and labs, water projects, and other facilities. Where have you been, Mr. Commander-in-Chief? Out on the campaign trail? Raising monies for the campaign? This is what Congress has been doing. On November 14, 2001, the White House strongly objected to the amendment, asserting that existing funding was, quote, more than adequate to meet foreseeable needs, close quote. Now, who's fighting for Homeland Security? Under pressure from the White House, Senate Republicans objecting to the emergency designation for the Homeland Security funding raised the Budget Act point of order. Efforts to waive the budget point of order failed. On December 4th, 2001, the Senate Appropriations Committee reported out by a vote of 29-0 the Defense Appropriations Bill for fiscal year 2002. In addition to the $20 billion appropriated on September 14, the bill would have provided $7.5 billion in additional Homeland Security funds, including $3.9 billion for bioterrorism and food safety, $1.3 billion for anti-terrorism law enforcement, $1.43 billion for security of mail and nuclear facilities, and $879 million for transportation and border security. The bill would also have provided an additional $7.5 billion to FEMA's disaster relief account for activities and assistance related to 9/11. On December 5, 2001, in a meeting with congressional leaders, President Bush threatened to veto the Defense Appropriation Bill because of funding, quote, that is not needed at this time. On December 6, 2001, Senate Republicans objected to the emergency designation for the Homeland Security funding in the Defense Appropriation Bill and raised a Budget Act point of order. Efforts to waive the budget point of order failed. On December 7, 2001, after negotiations with Senate Republicans, Homeland Security programs were reduced by over $3.6 billion. The Senate then passed the Defense Appropriations Bill. In April and May of 2002, the Senate Appropriations Committee held 5 bipartisan hearings, led and conducted by Senator Ted Stevens and me, concerning the defense of our homeland. Senator Stevens and I and others on that committee, Republicans and Democrats, heard from governors and we heard from mayors. We heard from firemen, we heard from law enforcement and emergency medical personnel. We heard from specialists in the field of counterterrorism. And based on those hearings, the Committee on Appropriations in the Senate produced a bipartisan supplemental appropriations bill to continue our effort to provide immediate resources to improve our nation's capacity to deter and respond to terrorist attacks. On May the 22nd, 2002, the Senate Appropriations Committee, by a vote of 29-0, reported out a supplemental appropriations bill that included $8.3 billion for Homeland Defense programs. And once again, on June 4, 2002, the President threatened to veto the bill because he believed that it contained unnecessary Homeland Security spending. On June 7, 2002, the Senate passed the Supplemental Appropriations Act for further recovery from and response to terrorist attacks on the United States. The bill provided $8.3 billion for Homeland Security programs, including the following amounts above the President's request: $265 million for airport security funds, $646 million for first responder programs, $716 million for port security. However, under pressure from the White House, conferees on that bill were forced to reduce Homeland Security funding from $8.3 billion to $6.7 billion, under pressure from the White House. In negotiations with House Republicans, Homeland Security funding was dropped for cybersecurity, for improved capacity for the Centers for Disease Control to investigate potential biological attacks, for airport security, for the Coast Guard, and for the Customs Service. On July 24 of this year, the Senate passed the conference report to the Supplemental Appropriations Act for further recovery from and response to terrorist attacks on the United States. Get this now. We're talking about war here. The war on terrorism. Where? Here, in this country. Which reduced the $8.3 billion for Homeland Security appropriated by the Senate to $6.7 billion. Did the White House agree to fund the full $6.7 billion for Homeland Defense program? Did it? No. The White House talks a good game on Homeland Defense. But the White House support is more about rhetoric than it is about resources. In order for the President to spend $2.5 billion for the Homeland Defense spending, it was necessary for him to do what? Just sign his name on a document designating the funding as an emergency requirement. What did the President choose to do? Did he choose to sign his name and start that $2.5 billion to flowing into the states and counties, municipalities of this country? No. The President chose not to make that designation. In making that decision, he terminated $2.5 billion of funding for the FBI, funding to train and equip our nation's firefighters, funding for the Corps of Engineers to help assure our water supply, funding for security at nuclear facilities, funding for the Coast Guard. Now tell that, Mr. President, at your next meeting, at your next campaign meeting, your next fundraiser, when you're talking about making war on Iraq, tell the people there.
break and come back to that speech by Senator Robert Byrd on October 10th, 2002, in front of the U.S. Senate about the war resolution. This is CPRmetro.org, community progressive radio for the metropolitan New York area and the world, and all weekend we'll be examining that war.